So you've just finished watching some tool on YouTube tell you how good the Nintendo DS is for homebrew and hacking. Neat, you thought. But why not just use a 3DS? And you're right, the 3DS is great. But what made the 3DS so great anyway? Well, it sure wasn't this. The 3DS took the best things about the DS and the PSP and put them together into one package. Well, I say one package, but really there's a unique 3DS for just about anyone. If you need something more compact, the original 3DS has a similar footprint to the DS Lite and the DSi middle child that came before it. If you want a smaller console but you need more power, there's the new 3DS, which pioneered putting pencil erasers on Nintendo consoles, as well as throwing naming conventions out the window. The original 3DS also had a bigger brother with the same specs but a bigger footprint, available as the 3DS XL. And throughout this video, I'm going to be using my new 3DS XL, which combines the biggest and most powerful versions of the 3DS into one. I'd say it's tied for being the best version of the 3DS alongside the new 2DS XL, with whom it shares its size and specs with, as long as you don't care about having a 3D screen. Additionally available in doorstop form factor, or DFF for short. So let's take a head count here real quick. In order of release date for the USA, we have the original 3DS from 2011, the 3DS XL from 2012, the 2DS in 2013, the new 3DS and the XL variant of that through 2015, and the new 2DS XL in 2017. That is a lot of 3DSs. Personally, my first device in the 3DS family was a 2DS that I bought off of eBay. It had a cracked screen, but I just replaced it myself to save a few bucks compared to buying a fully working one. Fun fact actually, the screens on the 2DS are actually just one physical LCD since the unit doesn't need to fold. But then that brings us to today with my gray new 3DS XL right here, which you guys would have actually seen before, which I had fixed in a video from early 2022 that you can watch right here. And an honorable mention goes out to my girlfriend's new 2DS XL right here. Now that you've met the family, I do still need to answer the question I asked earlier. What made the 3DS so great? The 3DS took what the DSi had started, but it fully fleshed it out. There was a proper home screen, a proper online storefront for digital downloads, cool social features, backwards compatibility with the DS, some cameras for messing around, and finally, an analog stick. I always think about the 3DS as the competitor to the PSP that Nintendo wished they had back in 2005. Except, they kind of still obliterated the PSP in sales either way, so maybe not? Okay, it was what everybody but Nintendo wishes the DS was back in 2005. 3D games play far better on here due to the greater specs than the DS. It feels like most 3DS games were kind of closer on par visually to what you might find on the GameCube. The original DS kind of felt like N64-ish. First-party and third-party games alike were popping off at this time, and Nintendo released hits for most of their major IPs, and they're pretty much all still great to go back and play even today. Especially with the 3DS and the DS being the form factor they are, you kind of have to hold on to the original hardware to play a lot of these games the right way. Of course, you can emulate the DS and the 3DS, but it's just not the same. Anyway, those are some of the reasons that the 3DS was such a hit with the average gamer back then. But you all know very well at this point that that's not me, I'm not the average gamer. But I'm installing Windows on a Mac Mini because I couldn't use Linux properly on my PS4. Also, I can play RetroArch on a Leapfrog. So what makes the 3DS so great to me? Okay, let's get this one out of the way. Of course, a modded 3DS can play 3DS games for free. Despite if that may cause you some moral turmoil, it's still the best way to experience all the different 3DS specific titles that the 3DS has to offer, given you have a fairly stout SD card to hold everything. One of the more interesting reasons that you're going to want to mod your 3DS, though, is emulation. After all, Nintendo themselves pushed emulation on this thing right off the bat with the Ambassador program. Early adopters who paid the launch price for the 3DS back in 2011 were referred to by Nintendo as 3DS ambassadors, which I suppose is a better name than sucker. These people got to pick out some NES and GBA titles to download for free onto their 3DS, and it was Nintendo's way to say sorry for pump and dumping the price of the 3DS from $250 at launch to $170 shortly after. While all of the NES titles were emulated, I guess the GBA titles weren't. See, the 3DS has a GBA port right here, wait, no it doesn't. Okay, but if it's not emulation, then it's running natively, right? Well, actually it is, despite not having a cartridge port. Let me introduce you to the magic of keeping the same CPU architecture for a long-ass time. Lucky for Nintendo, the GBA shares a very similar CPU architecture to that of the DS and the 3DS. So, with a little behind-the-scenes f***ery, the GBA Ambassador games ran natively on the 3DS, which is pretty cool. Let's get back on track though. Emulation on the 3DS, specifically custom firmware-enabled emulation. We'll kick things off with the Sega Genesis. Just like the DS before it, the 3DS runs Sega Genesis just fine. It's a complete breeze for this thing. Everything is running great. Get it? Because Knuckles is running here. He's running. Knuckles is running. Loading up some Super Nintendo games though, things take a bit of a weird turn. So you can see here that most of these emulators are running in RetroArch. That should actually look pretty familiar to you if you've seen my previous video where I installed RetroArch on a Leapfrog. If you haven't seen that video yet though, actually go watch that. That Leapfrog can do some amazing stuff. Anyway, booting up SNES games using the RetroArch Core version of SNES 9X results in pretty crappy results, to be honest. It felt like I was only running the games at half speed on both Super Mario World and F-Zero here, and initially I was really disappointed in this showing. But I did a little bit of research, and I guess the standalone application CIA version of SNES 9X runs much better. And a CIA on the 3DS, if you don't already know, it's like a standalone app or game that you can install directly to your home screen, instead of running in RetroArch. So I installed that, and not only do the games run better, but they also look a lot more crisp by default. I can confidently say here that SNES emulation on the 3DS is pretty good. Next up is Game Boy Advance. Just like I talked about earlier, GBA on the 3DS is really interesting because it can run the games natively. However, it gets a little less interesting when I tell you that it doesn't really matter. Maybe it's because I get to benefit from the higher performance on the new 3DS, but the whole time I was testing Game Boy Advance games, I used GPSP, which is a traditional emulator. And you know what?
I'm about to say it. Say it. I don't care that you
can run GBA games natively.
Because the games that I wanted to play worked fine, looked fine, played fine, and didn't leave me wanting anything more. That being said, I didn't test every single game in the GBA library, so your mileage may vary. But goddammit, if you need to run more than Danny Phantom Attack of the Killer Garage Sale on Nicktoons Collection Volume 3, to be honest, I don't know if this relationship is going to work out. I went into this intending to try out OpenAGB Firm, which is how you would run GBA ROMs natively on the 3DS, but I just don't see a reason to. I'm more than satisfied with how the GPSP RetroArch Core works. But you know what I'm really not satisfied with? PS1 emulation. Cause look at this shit. This is rough. Man, you know it's bad when the Leapfrog did it better. The 3DS, it's just not cut out for PS1 emulation, full stop. Sure, you can probably get away with 2D titles like Rayman and Mega Man, but come on, when did the PSP come out? Oh, you know, just like 6 years prior to the 3DS? Granted, PS1 games on the PSP are largely perfect, because you know everything is made by Sony and the processors are both fairly similar MIPS chips, and I'm not trying to discredit those who did the work to port PCSX Rearmed to the 3DS. I mean, it can't be an easy task to get the performance even to the level that it's at here, even if it's not great. My point is, if you want to play PS1 games, just don't look to the 3DS for a good solution. I was really hopeful that the 3DS would be able to emulate Virtual Boy games, since, you know, 3D screen and all that. Other than a VR headset, it seems like this would be the best way to experience Virtual Boy games. Unfortunately though, it's all a big letdown, because I couldn't even get my games to start, let alone play. And based on videos of other people who did get it to run, it does not look like I'm missing out on much, so I'll be sticking to the original hardware for that. This video is sponsored by PCBWay. I assume you've already heard of PCBWay before at this point. They do custom electronic circuit boards, 3D printing, CNC machining, all that cool stuff. But you might be thinking to yourself, that's pretty neat, but I don't really have a use for that. I don't even know how to design my own PCBs. And that's fine, because guess what? Same. So what can PCBWay do for people like you and me? Well, recently I've discovered that PCBWay has a section on their website called Shared Projects, and it's like Thingiverse but for electronic projects. Here's a few things I found just by searching Nintendo. Okay, so we've got a Game Boy Color Type-C power adapter board in here, that's sick. An N64 cartridge dumper, that's really sick. And here we got a replacement power supply for the NES. All of these things are made by the community, and PCBWay gives you the option to add almost everything you need for these projects to your cart instantly. They'll even have the whole thing assembled for you at their factory. There's really never been a better time to get into modding and creating with a utility like this. Head over to PCBWay.com after the video to get a look at some of these awesome projects, and you can also get $5 off your first order as a new user. One console that you cannot emulate on the 3DS period is the original DS, but you wouldn't want to anyway because, once again, those games can run natively on the 3DS. For a long time in the 3DS and DSi hacking scene, the general consensus was that running DS ROMs from the SD card slot just wasn't possible for one reason or another. But it also really wasn't that big of a deal for most people because DS flash carts up to that point had all been updated to work on the latest firmware on the 3DS, and they were cheap enough anyway to just buy one of those and play all the DS games you want on that, rather than wait and hope that someone would just miraculously figure out how to run DS games from the SD card. And then they did exactly that. Thanks to the work of these incredible folks, we could now play DS games off the SD card, no flash cart required. Compatibility had initially started off a bit rough, but it's actually gotten a lot better over the years. It can play most commercial games fine, and it's more than good enough for me. It even runs on the DSi. How about homebrew that isn't emulation? The 3DS actually takes some inspiration from the Wii in that there's a proper place for all your homebrew right on the home screen in this channel right here, the Homebrew Launcher. Here you can run any homebrew that you find on the internet, such as ThirdTube, a YouTube client. It actually runs really well here on the 3DS. Videos look as good as they possibly could on a screen this size, and it retains a lot of features that the desktop version has. You can still search, browse comments, and find new videos to watch. There is an official YouTube client for the 3DS as well, but it was discontinued back in 2019, so this is the best we're gonna get nowadays. Another great application is Anemone, a theme manager. The ominous 3DS background music never quite suited my tastes, so I used this to get rid of it, as well as install this cool galaxy background. It's a hell of a lot nicer to look at than one of the solid colors that you get by default. But damn it, this is a game console. We're not here to watch YouTube and decorate wallpapers. We're here to open a portal to an alien world and destroy society as we know it. And what do you know? Half-Life was ported to the 3DS just so we could scratch that itch. Technically, this isn't just Half-Life. It's the entire open source Zash 3D engine, which is a loader for Valve Gold Source-based games. The dual analog sticks of the 3DS allow for far better first-person shooter gameplay here than you could ever get on the DS or the PSP. 60 FPS maintained basically the entire time. Every once in a while though, it seems like a new sound or a new scripted event would trigger and it would cause some stutters, but as the game went on, it actually happened less and less. The biggest issues here by far are the load times. I mean, at least it's authentic to the experience of how it would have looked and felt back in 1998, I guess. While we're on the topic of first-person shooters though, look, it's everyone's favorite comment! It can run Doom! It can do it! So now I'm sure no one will ask if it can run Doom in the comments, right? Right? Space Cadet Pinball, everyone under the age of 60's favorite pack-in Windows game. And for everyone else, I'm sure someone ported Solitaire. But for some reason, Space Cadet Pinball is here on the 3DS. Why? Why is this here? Why do we do this? Why do we want this? Not just Space Cadet Pinball, why do we want any of this? Why do I want to play SNES games and GBA games on my 3DS? Why do I want to play DS games from an SD card when there's a perfectly good way to do it right here? Why do I have to modify and mess with everything I get my hands on? And why won't I enjoy using it otherwise? Is it because I'm just a cheap bastard who refuses to play games the legit way if there's an option to save me a buck? Or is it something more? Because, for example, if I truly wanted to play Rhythm Heaven that bad on my 3DS, and there wasn't a cheaper homebrew-based way to load it, I would just give in and buy the game secondhand and play it that way. And in that example, I'm hacking my 3DS because I want to play Rhythm Heaven on the cheap, but I'd still buy it if I didn't have that option because I want to play Rhythm Heaven that bad. But that's not how it is in reality. It's just not. That's not what I would actually do. So it has to be something else then. I have to be hacking for a different reason. Am I just not okay with being told no? And this is the way I rebel? Am I doing this just to spit in Nintendo's face for no real reason other than just because I can? Or am I doing this because I'm in love with the process and modding and the whole journey of it? And the end result doesn't really matter to me. After I install custom firmware or a soft mod or a jailbreak or whatever, and I load up all my games and install my favorite homebrew, do I even intend to do anything with it after that? Or play any of those games I installed? I mean, there's a reason you guys always see me playing through the tutorial or the first level of every single game on here. Is hacking a game console and installing all the games I always wanted as a kid and then never playing them my way of how other people will go and collect all their favorite childhood toys as an adult, put them on a shelf, and then never touch them ever again? No matter how many consoles I mod or how many times I play the first level of Super Mario World and then quit right after, will it ever be enough? Why can't I just be content with the hundreds of games I already have? Why aren't they enough? Why is it more fun for me to install the same games over and over again, but then never even play them? Why do I enjoy seeing this screen more than this screen? When did it become less about playing the games and more about obtaining them in the most convoluted ways? Should I even call myself a gamer at this point, or am I nothing more than a penny-pinching data hoarder with a nostalgia addiction? And does it matter? Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.